Good morning. I hope everyone had a productive day one. Look, we've packed a lot in and there's a lot to take in, but I hope you're taking the time to engage with customers, with partners, with the technology, and with all the Schneider resources here for you. Yesterday, Jean-Pascal kicked us off with this commitment to change how we do things. This notion of the challenges ahead of us require a new vocabulary of energy management, industrial automation, of digitization. This journey will take time, but the most important takeaway is we must begin now, because the challenges ahead of us require an entire transformation. I loved his analogy that it's like the internet in 1992. And I want to build on that for a minute, because if you go back to all the experiences, those of us who were here, some of us weren't, but those of us who were here going through that, all the experiences we imagined materialized, but in different ways. So you can know a destination, but not be clear how you get there, and you can still begin. And I think in our industry, the change of how we bid jobs, how we design jobs, how we build infrastructure, how we manage infrastructure, the human capital equation, all of it will change. It's not obvious right now how, but we know it will, and we have to begin the transformation. In the CNBC panel, we talked a lot about different industries and how we're solving the problems in the US. We have an energy infrastructure system that's old. We have a grid system that needs updating. You heard right now about the new energy landscape, and we'll talk more about that. And we're going towards a world that will be, whichever way you look at it, more decentralized, more decarbonized, and more digitized. Many of you told your own stories. We have customers here who have been thought leaders in this space, who started on these journeys a long time ago in different sectors and different spaces. We heard from some of them in the process of building these new hospitals that we're going to see these technologies in. I love the Penn Med example where they said, it's 2018. We just chose not to build a dumb hospital. And I think it's a little bit of a visceral comment, but it makes a lot of sense to me. Why today, if we're building infrastructure that's going to last 30, 40, 50 years, would we not build it with connectivity in mind? And why would we not use connectivity to take infrastructure that's at risk and make sure we de-risk it by having better asset monitoring, having better services, having better visibility to how that infrastructure performs? So that IoT journey that we talk about isn't hype, it's real. We make the things in IoT, and our job collectively as an industry is to make them available, make them more efficient, make them more reliable. I hope along the way you can see the resources we're bringing to you, but it's not just Schneider Electric. These resources are coming from across the industry. This is not a change one company can drive, no matter how big or how innovative. It requires an entire ecosystem to come together. And that's the exciting part of a conference like this, is we can begin that dialogue, not just with Schneider Electric, but with a lot of companies contributing to that process, including startups. And yesterday we talked about our Schneider Electric Ventures launch, which will allow us to engage with many, many more startups. So look, expect more of the same today. We'll continue this dialogue. We'll delve into the new energy landscape, and we have a fantastic panel that'll come up in a little bit and talk about how we're going to move away from this central structure to this distributed structure, what the implications are. And look, these cycles are common. Computing did the same thing. Some of you actually remember punch card computing. Then there were centralized computers. Then there were PCs. Then we went back to the cloud, right? We go centralized, decentralized, centralized, decentralized. Network traffic does the same thing. Energy infrastructure will do the same thing. It'll just do it on a different amplitude in terms of how long those cycles take. But the cycles are common across all these industries. We're also going to explore the new business models, because like any change, it's not just a change in technology, it's a change in business model. And in that business model, the roles different parties will play will change. The economics will be different. And we have a really innovative panel that will come in and talk about what they're doing there. Later on this afternoon, we'll have a panel with the Wall Street Journal, and we'll delve into the industrial Internet of Things and what's happening in Industry 4.0. These buzzwords are out there, but what do they really mean? What's happening today? Customers today, what choices are they making? And what are they planning for in the future? So the title of that session is What's Now and What's Next? And you'll hear from, again, a really interesting panel about their actual choices. Yesterday, Annette reminded us to say ecostructure every 2 minutes, so I'm just going to do that, ecostructure. But the other point she made was, look, this is a learning exercise. And so I really want you to continue to invest the time in the hub. And I can only say that the people from Schneider Electric that are manning those booths are not accidental choices. They are some of our best and brightest. They know their technologies, and they're passionate about the solutions that they're standing there educating customers in the marketplace. So please take the time to get to know them. Make sure your teams have follow-ups planned, and we have a lot of ways that we can engage after this event. Guided stores are still available, so if you need one of those, please let us know. We'd be happy to set it up. Now, one quick plug again about the event app. Make sure you download it, use it. And also on your My Schneider app, when you go through the tour, you can scan a QR code, and we've been giving out prizes, and we'll be doing some more of that today. So, just one more incentive to do that. And congratulations to the people who won yesterday. The app is a great way to learn, and it's also a great way to take away one of the biggest inefficiencies in our industry. This is going to sound weird, so brace yourself. The biggest problem in our industry is too much work gets done with people talking to people, right? And we do complex project work with handoffs that are massively inefficient. So using technology and getting the right data at the right time so people can do the work they do best, which is creative work, is one of the transformations we have to go through. So it's not just in the technology, but it's how we do work. And apps like My Schneider are a beginning, not a destination, but just a beginning of how we do that. So there's chat functionality. You can get answers to questions that normally you'd call someone to get. And I encourage you as leaders to use it, and I encourage you to ask your teams to use it. And look, if you have any questions about the digital experience, we have plenty of people running around. They have the black T-shirts on saying My Schneider app, and go ask them, and they'll give you any answers. Finally, on Twitter, if you are on Twitter, we're making a $1 donation to the Renewable Energy Transition Initiative. And every time you donate, we'll donate, so take an opportunity to do that. So our first session is going to be about the new energy landscape, like I mentioned. I've been trying to figure out how I'm going to introduce our leader of this panel. Mark Fiesel is our VP in this space. And Mark is one of those special people who has the capacity to have vision and the tenacity to see it through. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that he spent time on a nuclear submarine, but it's been a privilege for us to be working with people like Mark who are creating a vocabulary that we will look back that redefines the energy landscape in this industry. So I think you're really going to enjoy this panel. But before we go to the panel, let's watch this video.
The world's appetite for electricity is growing, and energy markets are changing globally. As a massive migration to renewable energy gains momentum, many people are taking advantage of the change and embracing prosumer technologies. Meanwhile, with 24/7 availability becoming ever more critical, some businesses are exploring microgrids as a way to ensure reliable supply. Throughout the energy system, it's a whole new game, with huge potential on both sides of the meter. For energy consumers, communities, and companies, it's an opportunity to achieve better efficiency, reliability, sustainability, and resiliency. For electric distribution utilities, it means more complicated network management and challenges to existing models and processes. But these electricity companies can turn disruption into opportunity. In the future, they may even become facilitators and orchestrators of the new energy system. On both sides of the meter, going digital today is the key to success. EcoStruxure Grid unites both sides of the equation. It lets distribution utilities boost efficiency while engaging and managing the demand side. EcoStruxure Grid helps utilities leverage flexibility and resiliency and unlocks new approaches for commercial, industrial, and corporate electricity consumers, like microgrids and energy as a service. With its digital architectures and services, EcoStruxure Grid bridges the gap between the supply and demand sides, providing a system-wide perspective. And because reliability of electricity supply and data integrity are key, it helps protect against cyber attacks by mitigating cyber risk, allowing sustained operational confidence. With EcoStruxure Grid, distribution utilities and energy prosumers can lead the way and take control of the new world of energy.
Good morning and welcome to the New Energy Landscape panel. My name is Mark Fiesel. I'm the Vice President of Smart Grid. What that means is that I lead our efforts in the electric utility segment and microgrid for North America. As you were being seated today, you saw a video about Montgomery County. And I think what's important about that video is that it highlights a lot of things that we're going to be talking about today. You heard about a county right outside of Washington, D.C., committed to sustainability. The people that live there want sustainable energy. The businesses that invest there and create jobs there are interested in sustainable energy. But you also heard about a community that has experienced some challenges with resilience. Several storms over the last 5 years have impacted their ability to serve that community. They've had traffic lights go down, they've lost the ability to dispatch fire and ambulance, and in some cases, they've had people that weren't able to get their power restored for over 8 days. Pretty amazing to think about that here in 2018, less than 25 miles from the Capitol, that still occurs today. You also heard a story or a plea about a business model. You heard Michael Yambrock, who was in that video, talk about energy as a service, a desire to get the benefits of more resilient, more sustainable energy, but doing so in a way that doesn't impact their capital budgets. These are some of the themes of the new energy landscape that we're going to be touching upon today. I'm honored to have a great panel here with me today who I'm going to ask to introduce themselves right now as we talk about these topics.
Okay, thank you. I'm Darcy Immerman. I'm the Senior Vice President of Resiliency at AECOM. AECOM is a global engineering, construction, and consulting firm with 90,000 employees worldwide. My responsibility is to work across power, water, transportation, and communications to make our customers' facilities more resilient and to mitigate some of the risks that we're dealing with, both physical and man-made.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sula Kulchuta. I'm the CEO of EIQ Mobility. We're a very new startup in Silicon Valley, only about 2 weeks old. As I said, very new. We have our goal is to deliver, actually simplify and accelerate electrification of fleets. Our goal is to deliver electric fleet as a service eventually. We start big and then we think big and then we start small, where we offer a planning and analysis software platform. And then our goal is to move really fast into charging as a service with new business models and new technologies.
Great. I'm Chris Crosby. I'm the CEO of Compass Data Centers. We're a wholesale data center provider that provides to large companies cloud, co-location, as well as large enterprise companies. We provide data centers from 1 megawatt up to campuses of 250 megawatts plus, as well as we have, so that's on the core side of the business, and then we have an edge side of the business, which is doing smaller type hut type data centers in distributed markets.
Good morning, Paul Tino on behalf of the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus. We are a group of 11 healthcare, critical care, medical research institutions clustered in downtown Buffalo. About 17,000 employees during the course of a business day covering 120 acres. We work together on strategic energy initiatives, trying to drive collective action, things that can generate savings, market revenue, and certainly enhance reliability and resiliency. In addition, proud to serve as the program director for a NYSERDA-sponsored clean energy incubator. The connection is, it's very holistic. In other words, we use the campus and the environment there as an applied demonstration site for these entrepreneurs and their concepts as they come up through. So I think it gives us an opportunity to kind of close the loop with respect to energy, especially in Western New York.
Hi, Karen Morgan. Thank you very much for having us. Dynamic Energy Networks founder, co-founder, and CEO. We actually stood up our company a little over a year ago, and we are backed by the Carlyle Group. We are a Carlyle company that invests in, owns, and operates energy infrastructure. And when we started our business models, evaluation of where the market was going, it was very clear to us coming out of the utility side of the industry, that is owning and operating solar and wind assets in the US and Canada. We saw where the market was going and shifting to decentralization, digitization, decarbonization, and distributed energy just makes sense. So we looked around and we tried to identify the best-in-class partner that we could work with, and fortunately we had developed a strong relationship with Schneider already, and so Schneider Electric and Dynamic Energy Networks have really been attached at the hip for over a year, supporting the whole energy as a service business model, and we're looking forward to sharing some of that experience and stories and where we think all of that is going. So thanks for having us, Mark.
Great, thank you very much. So I've got some great news. You're going to be able to ask these esteemed panelists some questions here as we go on. I'm going to begin to get the conversation going again, but if you want to think about those questions, you'll note that there's some microphones down towards the front, and so I'll let you know maybe a minute or so early, then you can start coming down. So Darcy, we're going to begin with you. You've been on the front lines of this energy transition, from the halls of the public service commissions to state governments to the federal government. You really helped lead the country's response from Sandy. Now, of course, leading resilience for one of the largest design build companies in the world. Tell us about that journey a little bit and the drivers and factors that have brought us here today.
Sure. No, I'm happy to. First of all, I just want to say, everybody keeps thanking us for being here, but can I just say thank you to Schneider? This is a fantastic event. And I mean, isn't that well-deserved? And I'm just going to say eco-structure so I can get it out of the way, all right? So I'm good there. So the way that I kind of look at this is, I came out of the energy services business, the ESCO business, 35 years ago when that business began. And one of the things that I always find striking is the story that says, if Alexander Graham Bell walked in here today and looked at your phone, he'd have no idea what he was looking at. But if Thomas Edison walked in and went to the utility plant down the street, he'd feel right at home. And that's really the fundamental difference that we're dealing with now, is that the change has got to be so rapid in order to be relevant that it's an entirely different landscape than we've ever operated in before. We talked about the 3Ds, the decarbonize, democratize, which is a big part of that, and decentralize. So the rise in distributed energy resources, people actually controlling their ability to recover quickly. Most of what resiliency is about how quickly you can recover. So we have been very good as in North America of building things that resist things. We're very good at robust structures. What we never really got very good at is how quickly those can actually come back up and work. So what we've learned the hard way with some of these disasters, what we're learning today in California with the horrible wildfires, is that if you don't have a plan, it's the old, you don't have a plan, you plan to fail, you whatever. That goes like that. So fundamentally, that's really where we're at as a nation on this kind of idea. And I heard a lot yesterday. I'd remarked to Mark, we heard a lot about sustainability yesterday. And from my perspective, dealing with folks who are in recovery mode where they've lost a lot, including human life, sustainability is sort of seen as a good practice and a good way to get to, but it costs money. Whereas when we meet with a mayor or a general or a governor, they understand that resiliency is an investment. So really looking across how you look at the new energy landscape as investments. Our experience with that, for one thing, that I'm sure many of you heard about, is the ComEd Bronzeville microgrid. So our team actually put together a return on investment model for a microgrid that made it through the Public Utilities Commission. It took a lot of time. It took an enormous amount of community interaction. But the interesting thing was it was based on a triple bottom line, which means that we were not just looking at economics and the environment, but the social benefit of a microgrid. And to get that through a Public Utilities Commission that usually just looks at the numbers and still thinks, unfortunately, of their clients as ratepayers, is something that was really striking and different in that it was really community driven. So I think that move is really profound. When you start to talk about resiliency as it relates to recovery, it takes you about 2 minutes to get to cybersecurity. The whole issue around how we react as a nation to cyber attacks and the cyber attacks that are happening in our utilities today and our cities today constantly is frightening. So really sort of thinking about how you not only are able to protect your citizenry physically, but also in the digital space.
Absolutely, thank you.
You're welcome.
Scilla, when you and I first met, you were in academia, a scientist, and you're sitting here today as the CEO of a company that is existing because of some of these changes. Tell us a little bit about that journey and what's next.
Sure. I spent about 12 years at Berkeley Lab developing OpenADR, and it took us about 10 years to get it into the industry, which we don't have that much time anymore, the way I look at it. The switch for me has two reasons. One is impact, and the other one's accelerated timelines. I really want to have impact much sooner than 10 years, and I really want to tackle those issues that are big. So buildings are about 11% of greenhouse gas emissions. Transportation is about 28%. So tackling transportation, there's a huge impact potential there. The other thing that I want to tell you is that I realize over time, as in academia, we can't do it with technology alone. Technology is great. Innovation in technology is great. But if we don't come up with innovative business models and a way to finance them, it's never going to happen. As we look at the International Energy Agency's forecasts, if we want to keep the Earth's temperature below 2 degrees Celsius limit, we need about $2.3 trillion to be able to do that. That's a worldwide investment that's triple of what we have today. Where's that money going to come from, and how are we going to make that happen? So thinking through the problems not as just technology or research areas, but really thinking through them as multifaceted problems that we need to tackle and solve immediately is very important for me. So that's sort of the transition now.
Absolutely. And I just want to add, I think, a really interesting dynamic in this new energy landscape. And I think about our company, Schneider Electric, and how we respond to these changes and how we think about innovation. And the process that was undertaken to put a team together, existing of many Schneider Electric employees, bringing best-in-class talent onto the team, such as yourself, to go form this company in an amazingly short time, 4 months?
It was an amazing experience. We took about 14 weeks to sit down in a room and call about 250 people. We listened to their pains. We talked about their personal frustrations about electrification of the fleets. And then we talked about solutions. So every solution that we came with, all the products that we're going to come with, they stem from our conversations with the industry. So we're really excited about learning this process, adopting it for our new business, because it will be an iterative process. As the industry changes, we need to continue to listen. We need to continue to develop products that respond to those needs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, I think, so neat for me to see as a Schneider Electric employee talking about, much earlier on this year, this idea that we're going to try to innovate in new ways, and now sitting on a stage with the CEO of one of those companies is just really exciting.
Thank you.
Chris, one of the stats that we hear about this new energy landscape is that the demand for electricity is going to increase by 50% over the next 30 years. In the developing countries, this is the story of access to energy. There's still 1 billion people without access to energy and another 1.3 billion with access to only intermittent energy. Here in North America, the story is a little different. It's the story of the electrification of the transportation segment, but also, of course, the data center segment having a big role in filling that electrification. Over the last 25 years, you've played a huge role. You mentioned a number as large as 250 megawatts in terms of the size of some of these data centers that you are now deploying through your teams. Take us through a little bit how your relationship with energy and your thoughts around the grid have changed over that time period, and maybe a little bit of glimpse in what the future looks like for you.
Okay. Well, data centers are in a unique space. I mean, really the industry launched post-dot-com bust, and back in about 2005, 2006, Google actually started using the metric of per kW. So we've been doing that as an industry now for well over a decade. What's really interesting about the data center space is we have a capitalistic tendency to get more efficient around our kW usage. And so if you look at data center consumption, one of your old colleagues, Jonathan Kumi, published a report in 2016 from Lawrence Berkeley Labs, where data center consumption was growing at 25% clip per year from 2000 to 2005. It then went into the teens and now is at about a 3 to 4% type of growth. It's about 2%, a little bit over 2% of the total energy consumption of all industry. When you look at what has gone into that, what we're able to do from storage and compute and network, it's pretty fascinating. And then when you couple that with the fact that data centers themselves are very good from a utility perspective, they've got a perfect base load. We have a high power factor. We don't have a lot of variability. We've also been one of the key drivers in sustainable type of approaches. One, we have scale. We can consume at 50 megawatts or 30 megawatts. It's very hard to build sustainable energy plants, other than small scale for a house or for office building or things like that. To do that at scale is really the only way that you can really get any benefits. So it's been fun to be on the tip of that spear.
Absolutely. Thank you. Paul, you've been in this industry since really some of the beginnings of digitizing the energy infrastructure. One of the first things that we started to figure out how to do once we could automate switchgear and loads is demand response. You know, markets formed. It says, look, if we can take load, which historically has been static, and make it somehow active and make it interact with the grid, that should provide value to the overall grid. You know, Paul has led an organization, the Peak Load Management Association, that represents folks all over the country thinking about those things. You now, in one of the most progressive states in terms of policy, you've been part of this New York REV process, which, as you answer, maybe you can detail a little bit what that is for everyone out there. And of course, in a critical healthcare segment. At the same time, things still aren't completely easy with respect to the regulatory models and the incentives, and even the art of the possible within your facilities and campuses. What's going on?
Yeah, what's going on?
Wow. So New York is a little bit busy right now, lots of moving parts, and I don't want to weigh things down with a long-winded explanation about REV, but just look at REV as Governor Cuomo and the state of New York's initiative to increase deployment of distributed energy resources, renewables, cogeneration, building automation, et cetera. And to do it in a platform or an environment that's driven by market animation, motivation coming and driven by the market versus motivation and movement coming from the use of incentives. So for us on the campus, really what we would like to do is increase our inventory of distributed energy resources, work to balance the use of those resources with respect to our goals for resiliency, our goals for sustainability, and obviously our operational constraints for our benefit, but also to provide a service back to the grid and to participate in a market that compensates us for providing that service. So despite weather reports, and for the record, Syracuse gets far more snow than Buffalo, but despite weather reports, we don't have a significant resiliency issue in Western New York. We certainly don't have that on the medical campus. So a lot of our motivation is more from the economic standpoint. With respect to generating savings, market revenue, and again, enhancing reliability and resiliency, but also as an attraction for economic development and growth. So from our perspective, that double-sided glossy that the economic development agencies pass out should have a bullet point with respect to energy. And in this digitized society, power quality is of the utmost importance. So while that glossy should speak to the skill set of the labor force in Buffalo and the educational level and the cost of living and et cetera, it should also speak to the quality of energy that's available for these companies, complementary or otherwise, that come into the area. So that's really, really what drives us. Unfortunately, as we make strides, as we make investments as independent institutions, I think there's a question and a challenge with respect to pace. So business is moving. We're blueprinting, we're really not conceptualizing anymore. We're not interested in chalk talks, in whiteboard sessions. We're moving. And the pace of business is out of sync with the pace of the regulatory and the utility world. That's a significant missed opportunity from our perspective. We're going to continue to move on. So part of what we like to do is we want to do that with innovation. We want to help drive this. We want all the stakeholders at the table. So we don't take action despite the utility. We want the utility to be our partner. We want the regulatory community and policymakers to be our partner. But at the end of the day, we're going to move forward in the best interest of our organizations. So it's a business model challenge. It's not a technology challenge at this point in time. And I think where we need to look is to quantify those value streams, the societal benefits, the other intangible benefits that flow grid to customer, but also customer to grid.
Paul, I think Karen must have slipped you 20 to set her up or something here. But I'll try a little bit. I probably can't top that though. But Karen, when we met 3 years ago, it really does echo the kind of conversations that we're having today. There's an incredible untapped opportunity in this infrastructure that exists if we can operate it in new and better ways, but there's some real things getting in the way. There's technology risks, right? The cost of battery and solar dropping quickly. What's going on there? What's the right kind of technology for batteries? Which battery company will be in existence 2 years from now? Regulatory, can I depend upon stability here, or will there be changes that will impact my ability to interface with the grid and, to Paul's point, monetize some of those things? Operational risks. If I've got these equipment, the software I've acquired, can I operate it and optimize it in such a way to get the kind of returns? So these represent risks that right now are being held by the energy consumer. To really empower them to take that next step, we're going to have to figure out a way to transfer some of those risks off, and this is what you've been building.
EcoStructure.
Yeah.
No, so had to do it.
I hope you get a
Darcy beat me to
discount
it.
for that. So.
But that is a serious part of the equation. Yeah, so we're shifting the model from a CapEx to an OPX model. We're taking away the conversation around ROI. We're focused on IRR. And when we were thinking about how to stand this business up, it was how can we have huge impact? All of the ecosystem is important. Everything we're doing at the community level, at the local level, is really important. All the stakeholders have an equal voice in how we make this shift. But from our perspective, we really needed large capital to make a difference. And we really needed a global technology partner to make a difference. And that combination is what we've been weaving together and working on. And I think you heard from Andrew Marino yesterday on the CNBC panel. I mean, the redevelopment of JFK Terminal 1 was a massively complex exercise by Carlyle and their airport group, and Schneider and Den and others have been focused on the resilience and sustainability, avoiding single points of failure, solving these very complex and integrated, ideally integrated solutions. And so with flexible capital, strategic capital, that has 3 decades of experience of integrating these types of solutions into a technology base that, by the way, is not just a project, but it is growth, it is multi-generational, it is being able to tack on easily the next technology. Part of our energy infrastructure investment at JFK includes electrification. So EV is hugely important to us, and how we manage that and how we integrate that into energy infrastructure, microgrids, a series of microgrids in this case, tied into all of that EV infrastructure is essentially what we, within this past year, have been able to succeed at. And that includes the parties. I know this sounds, and I apologize, Amr, but it is important that we do communicate. So I'm going to open that app, and I'm going to start communicating with a couple of people more efficiently, because that complexity around critical infrastructure will help drive a lot of the activities sort of organically bottom up. And that's one example. Another example, university systems or a cluster of medical facilities where we sit there and we think about the art of the possible. We talk about that. And we try to start with a clean piece of paper and say, look, we're here to be helpful. We're not consultants, we're not advisors, we're not asking you to pay us to do this. We are going to share our thoughts with the best and brightest that we are working with to come up with the right solution. And they are bespoke. And over time, there are patterns, and we're able to rinse and repeat to a certain extent, but they are bespoke, particularly at this stage.
Right.
And so we talk to a university, and the university says, well, we want to own our infrastructure. We say, well, what does that mean? Do you want to take the risk? Are you willing to take that risk? Oh, no, we don't want to take the risk. We just want to own it.
Just want to own it.
Well, what does that mean? Well, what they really mean is governance. We want governance rights. We want a seat at the table. We all want to be at that table. We want transparency. And I can guarantee you, when you're working with port authorities and governors and the state watching you, you have to have transparency. So we're pretty good at that. We also do, and Andrew mentioned this yesterday, gain sharing. So we think about, again, under the art of the possible, how can we reinvest and create a life cycle reinvestment type structure back into that university system, which feeds and fuels the knowledge base of the undergraduates and the graduate programs. It ties into the curriculum and brings all of these capabilities in. So that's how we as strategic capital are thinking about this. We're thinking big, we're thinking bold, we're thinking interoperability, and energy as a service is just the beginning from our perspective.
Can I make a comment? So in listening to this, I think the thing that is sticking out to me, I'm sure the rest of you, is everybody up here is talking about the fact that innovation is being driven by collaboration. And I think that's a little bit of a turn on the head for those of us who came out of technical industries, or certainly out of the engineering and architecture field, is that, it was always sort of, I have a good idea, I'm going to be in my garage and go forward, and all will follow me because I've got the best mousetrap. And what everyone has said up here is that none of that is happening anymore. There are no game changers honestly happening in a garage. Every one of us is in a collaborative situation in order to innovate. And it's driven by what the customer needs to do as far as their goals, not driven by what they think is the platform of technology they should necessarily start with. So part of the education process now is for them to understand, when we come in as a team, there are multiple companies coming to the table. And that's a very different model sometimes for older, more established businesses to understand. And that's part of what we all have to do out there in the field, is help turn that on its head.
Yeah, and just to tack on to Darcy's comments, I mean, one of the things that, and it was a really interesting experience for our team, because to be fair, we hadn't operated at this scale before. And some of my colleagues who are in the room here were really front and center on how do we have an impact in a $13.3 billion investment. And microgrids, everybody thinks of them as really small, but what we're doing is not small. It's very scalable, and it is much like what we've seen in these other markets. And so it turned out that in the case of that particular project, the most important piece of it was the energy. They put the box, they named it sustainability. There were 30 boxes in an org chart, and we were in the right-hand corner in the bottom, and nobody paid attention to us. And then when it came out to be, this is a mandate by Port Authority, by governor, that box became the most important part of the conversation in the final negotiations. So that's where this is all going.
Every airport.
And it is really important that the leadership that you have here in this organization and the partners and the customers are working together to to make that happen. So I just very passionate about this, and I apologize.
Yeah, I want to follow up what Darcy said too. Electrification of transportation is a big topic, and there are a lot of existing players today. If we were to come in and say that we're going to do everything from scratch, it would be ridiculous. Our goal is to really sort of consolidate the offerings that are already out there and provide one package to the fleets. That's a very different model than trying to own everything, trying to sell everything. We are going to be having a lot of partners in this space. When you look at our partner space, it's a huge number of companies, some new, some old, some more established. And bringing that ecosystem together and providing it to the fleets is a new kind of thinking. Everyone's trying to grow their own pie or slice of the pie right now. What we want to do is grow the pie for everyone and then take a sliver of it as well. So that's sort of the new kind of thinking in our mind in terms of bringing together the ecosystem too.
Paul?
You know, and Mark, I think we throw this term disruptive around, and if you say something, whether it's a collaboration or a technology or a business model is disruptive, everybody is put off a little bit. So the only way for a collaboration to work is for everybody to check both egos and agendas at the door, and we can't label things as disruptive because they're different. And one of the challenges we have is if we're going to quantify the future and motivate investment now, we cannot look at things historically and as we have traditionally, or we're going to get to the same result. So I think sometimes our verbiage, as insignificant as it sounds, is actually very significant and puts up a barrier.
Absolutely.
Let me give just a little different lens on this. I think one of the challenges with sustainability that's out there is that there's broad swaths applied to it, and a lot of the options for generation, different sources of generation are there's right tools for the right jobs. Clear-cutting forest in a place that doesn't get a lot of sunlight to put solar panels up is not a sustainable solution.
That's right.
But things like that are done today for greenwashing effects and things along those lines. We have right fuel sources in right scenarios. One of the things from a data center perspective is really we will dictate what markets that we go into because of utility environments, the transmission, what we're able to get from a transmission perspective to get to those generation sources. How do we get the resiliency that's necessary? Because if you have 92 megawatt engines, you don't want them all turning on at once. That's not good. Yes, we have resiliency. Yes, we have our own microgrids, and that's always been the case in data centers, but that's not the intent. I think one of the challenges that we run into is not everything's perfect for a microgrid. Not everything's perfect for sustainable energy.
Yep.
And there's too much of broad strokes that go into this, as opposed to, no, this is the right opportunity for this particular application set. And I think that's one of the biggest barriers that we have, is we talk in generalities when, in reality, this is the right solution for that particular location.
So just to tag on to that, so I agree, it's very hard to get deep into conversations in an hour. But we have done exactly what you're describing because we felt the same challenges. It really is about sitting down with the customer end user and trying to draw out of them what is the outcome that they're looking for. And back to the comment about ownership and governance, there's a little confusion there. And then when it came down to, what else do you want? Oh, well, we want gain sharing. We want to participate. We want to be aligned. We want to co-invest. And so flexible, strategic, open, and innovative and creative matters in capital as much as it does in technology. And the integration of those two things from an industrial perspective is really important because I think that's where you can facilitate a holistic solution and we don't get boxed into, what's your IRR? Can you achieve that lowest cost of capital?
When some of that investment would be better served to actually fix the infrastructure that we already have.
Exactly.
So, we're doing work with PG&E now to try to figure out where they've got vegetation on their lines in Northern California. We know this has been part of the issue with the fires. So we get too far into the green and go out and come up with things that we think is part of the new economy. We haven't gone back and said, we already have a significant investment in infrastructure. And we have got to actually fix what we have better, because ultimately all these microgrids go back into a transmission and distribution system that's managed by an ISO that flows energy all across North America. And too often we go down the easy way, which is sometimes let's build it from the ground up. Whereas, the investment that we've made, 50% of what we have in this country will be built and doing exactly what it was built for 50 years ago. So we have a lot of investment already that we have to recapitalize and reinvest in. So
We don't have standardization. I mean,
None.
When you're trying to deploy gigawatts of capacity, as our industry is, and you go, okay, well, this is a 69 kV distribution, that's 230, this is 128, we'll give it to you at 13.2, we'll give it to you at 12.5. So you've got all these different things that you're trying to do, and then we'll take and make investments where we're stepping up from a 13.2 to a 34.5 to distribute on a campus until they can get us a 230 kV and get us the right, we've just got, there are so many barriers around things. There's so much NIMBY, not in my backyard. No, we can't put up better efficiency power lines because I don't want that power line near my house. These things are real.
Yeah,
And I mean, they happen all the time, and there's no magic wand around it other than people kind of getting to a point where business, to your point, is just going to drive the solution. So we choose markets specifically for power and fiber, where we can get rights of ways.
And we have to be careful that we don't get trapped by geography. So because our campus, for instance, is in a good place from an infrastructure standpoint, we're still in Buffalo, New York. And contrary to popular opinion, we have infrastructure in the ground, I wasn't there, that Thomas Edison actually touched. So that's cool and scary as hell. So as we look at our campus and where we are, we have to be concerned with where the rings around us are. And if our geography, because it's an urban setting, lends itself to specific solutions and precludes us from others, that's fine. But that adjacent microgrid or that adjacent portfolio of assets could be structured entirely different and likely for different reasons. But I think there's value in looking at stacking those independent aggregations together to kind of address that geography problem and to keep us from your point of just trying to throw a blanket solution over everything because it doesn't apply.
It's very complicated because it's the regulatory framework and it's at multiple levels, and it's, in the university systems, for example, even private universities, there are procurement rules. These procurement rules were around buying little widgets.
Staples.
And there shouldn't be.
Staple procurement, yeah.
Yeah, it shouldn't be around a decision of, how do I integrate my infrastructure to make it future-proof for the next, series of generations, and how do I structure it so that it is an enablement or an update that can happen, because you all know it's coming, they don't, but you know the technology is improving, and you know that you can upgrade and enhance, you know that the AI is going to make a big difference. So setting ourselves up to create those standards, I think, is a very important part of our jobs.
There's one other driver that we haven't really talked about, and I hate to be Darcy Downer because we've been talking about everything is so hard. But there's one part that's really working really, really well. How many people in this room, raise your hand, are in the energy efficiency business? You provide building automation, temperature controls, lighting, drives, motors, right? Smart technologies in buildings. The first level of how we look at how we generate a kilowatt is still the one that we save.
That's right.
And we are having a profound impact. I've been doing this for 35 years in that business, in the ESCO business. We are having a profound impact on the way people are making decisions about how they manage the kilowatt hour that they buy. So you gotta start with saying, all right, we did that. And honestly, when we first started doing third-party financing for energy efficiency business, people thought we were absolutely out of our minds. And now, energy services performance contracting is the most common public-private partnership used in this country for funding energy projects. So we will get there, right? And all of you that do that will be part of that trajectory because you've already done it. You've done it in energy efficiency.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's creating that layer now, the next generation, which should be inclusive. So, long-term contracts, like concession agreements, obviously have multiple contracts within them. People get hung up on, power purchase agreements or specific types of contracts. For us, it doesn't matter. It's what is the contractual arrangement that makes the most sense. If I've got a 30-year concession agreement, how do I tuck in the ESCO agreement, the equivalent of the PPA, and all of that, so.
Great. So I do want to be able to open the floor for questions, and we're down to about 15 minutes. And so if you've got a question in mind, please start to come forward. And while you're doing that, Chris, you kind of brought up, and everyone has built upon this idea of partnership in this, in this time, which I think is absolutely critical. There are risks, there are drivers that any one company is going to have a difficulty in quantifying, control, and shaping. So this idea of partnership is important. I think about a presentation that you did, I believe it was in Dallas a long time ago. You were right in the midst of figuring out how to go build out your business. And I remember you standing on stage and saying, look, you know, I'm going to need some partnerships to go do this. And it was a pretty forceful conversation around expectations of, you know, what you have with your partners. And I was just hoping you can share what has worked in terms of partnerships? How have you been able to form strong partnerships and scale your company the way you have?
So, you know, I'm a computer scientist by background, so I'm a big Deming fan. Grew up in the lean manufacturing and telecom, and you know, there's industrialization type approaches, the Ford approach, right, or the assembly line, and we put things together, and then there's more of a productized type of approach, like the Toyota, you know, Camry as a for example, or the Boeing 737, where you have key partners that you go to that you're single sourced, and you're going to drive efficiencies that your subcomponents can actually have margin, which is a novel concept.
Thank you.
And because you're driving things down from a TCO basis and focused on things like speed and quality as opposed to, and TCO as opposed to subcomponent cost. And it's just a mentality shift. There's no way to do things. There's a reason why you can drive a Toyota today and you can't drive an Oldsmobile. The model does work. It works in many, many industries, and it's happened many, many times before, and it forces a different lens in terms of the way how things get looked at. It's not been done effectively. Construction is antithetical to this. You know, we build buildings in 6 months from ground up, which is unheard of. Mm-hmm. Well, you can't do that if you are all things to all people all the time. And so you've got to have partnerships. You do have to have some levels of standardization as it relates to what your offering is, which in my personal opinion means you have to willfully suck at some stuff.
That should be our new motto.
A great model. Just a reminder that the microphones are down the front, so you can come down to those. So I need your guys' help on something. You heard that part of my title is utilities. So tell me how I can go. What is to be the future of the electric utility market?
Yeah, so we partner with utilities. We think it's important not to put up walls, but build bridges with the incumbents. And you know, at the end of the day, utilities are monopolies, oligopolies. They are there to serve the public. And when they are not serving the public adequately, and we're not taking advantage of the technology and embracing that, then it's time for them to shift their models. And it's folks like the people in this room that are going to make that happen. And in some cases, it's happening. I mean, Duke did a great job with you on Montgomery County. We've done quite a bit of business in the utility scale and distributed energy world with some of the unregulated, more progressive utilities. So I think, you know, I view it as many on-site generation opportunities you can have, and figuring out how we change these rules so it's not all about, you know, hitting the taxpayers or, you know, having to increase those rates as a function of on-site generation.
So in utilities now, there are actually people that have a title, Utility of the Future. Mm-hmm. That's part of their job. And the same thing with cities, with chief resiliency officers. And even the military now has this whole installation of the future movement, and none of them talk to each other. So they're the biggest employers in an area. Each of them is providing things back and forth to the other. And when they have a big installation of the future event for the Army, there's no utility invited. But the utility doesn't raise their hand and say, why am I not in the room either? So part of that is these big ecosystems are not collaborating well at this point either. And utilities, they got to learn to play. Mm-hmm.
Well, how do you make monopoly compete?
You know,
well,
Mark,
if you look at their shrinking base, they're going to have to figure out that there's some little sliver that's got to be competitive.
Well,
you got to create competition.
You have to, yeah, yes. Absolutely, you have to.
Paul?
And I think it's three things, and I think we talk pace, so we won't talk about pace of business. I think you can't continue to have the conversation primarily or only between the utility and the Public Service Commission.
That's right.
You have to have the customer as part of that conversation. What I run into a lot also, which would be the third point, is we tend to do projects, initiatives, funding opportunities, tend to put us, and I'll use the word silos. I prefer cylinders of excellence. You could use either one. But then those divergent projects never speak to each other, even though we all know that holistically they're intimately connected and they should be working together. And until you start to unite those projects and those thoughts and those concepts, you're going to have a hard time making progress.
Thank you. Great news. We've got time to go to the audience. And Brandy, why don't you go ahead and kick us off? Please state your name and the question.
Hi, so I'm Brandy Henson. Kind of an interesting question, but I just wanted you to comment on how the current administration has affected the new energy landscape and your take on that.
How about no comment?
Yeah, really.
Next question, no politics.
I'm from Massachusetts. That's the end of my comment.
Can we do next question?
Yeah, we just
Next
keep our
question.
heads down
No,
and
but
keep
you know what,
doing what we do best.
In
Yeah.
all honesty, I have to tell you, we cannot get tied down at a federal level when it comes to the new energy economy,
Amen.
simply because there has never been a national energy policy.
Right.
We have 50 states with 50 energy policies. And if you look at seeing things like governors signing on to the Paris Accord for climate change, mayors signing on to the Paris Accord for climate change, the activity is happening at the state and local level, and the feds can just do what they do.
I agree. The train has left the station, and there's no turning back. So
That's right. You know, this is a movement that's being led by the consumers and now the prosumers. And to your point, we don't have to wait for a federal government to do something. In fact, I think an interesting phenomenon, I think we've seen states step up like never before,
Right.
knowing that they have to lead. Thank you.
Good question.
Rick Siddall's Farnsworth Group, Chicago, Illinois. We're doing a $100 million water plant, wastewater. We're looking to do a microgrid, looking to partner with a FERC, which would be a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which would be UPS to the water plant, and then also associate with a partner that would provide frequency modulation to the utility, kind of a partnership where win-win for providing frequency modulation to the utility and also provide backup power to the water plant. So we're looking to partnership with somebody. We haven't been able to find a microgrid capability with somebody who would want to do this. We're looking for 20 to 40 megawatts. There's one right now in McHenry, Illinois. It's a FERC, I think it's PGM, but we haven't found anybody else that would want to do this with us. Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you. In fact, it was just breakfast today, Darcy. I think you were saying something about the water wastewater segment.
I called them the great unwashed, which is probably not fair. But I know everybody in the room that deals in energy efficiency has always said, why don't we get more water, wastewater work? And in those cylinders of excellence, they take the cake. So they are very much insular, even within the communities that they operate in. So it's a tough nut to crack.
yeah, it's interesting. We were talking about that last night, and that is an area of focus for us, and energy, wastewater is really important. I mean, energy is great, but without clean water.
And it's the next conflict. We know it's the next conflict issue is going to be water on a global scale. And you know, AECOM owns Medcafinetti. So any of you that ever had to take a class in college about water, wastewater, the textbook is written by Medcafinetti. And that textbook was written years ago and really hasn't changed. So that's a dinosaur industry that has terrific opportunity if we can figure out the right business model. It's really what it comes back to.
And in terms of technology, there's been a lot of work that's been done in wastewater, demand response in wastewater systems, especially in California. There's been guidebooks and things that have been developed. So the technology is not the most difficult thing in this case, even providing regulation as a grid service. But I think that there is a lot of other things that need to come together.
So kind of go back to one of the challenges, more of a business model challenge than a technology challenge. Once again, a bit of a common theme that we're beginning to hear now that we've, begun connecting all of these assets together. I think we've got a pretty good understanding of how they work together and how to optimize them. But whether it's regulatory or financial or contractual, we continue, those seem to be where the largest barriers are today on these projects.
That's right.
And I think we spend a lot of time conceptualizing, and I try to be very applied, and I think there's value in demonstration and learnings from demonstration. If we don't presuppose outcomes, but we put pieces together to see what will happen, that's where we'll learn, and then we'll create those models. It's tough to find that time to check out of the discussion and check into the demonstration. And for a lot of these issues, I think we're there.
I think, oh, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, no, I think
we've got time for one last question.
Interesting.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Tristan Jackson with the Worley Parsons Group. Thank you all to the panel for a very interesting discussion. And I really appreciated some of the comments about collaborating for innovation and about choosing areas in which we will willfully suck. So I think that the scale of the challenge we're all seeing in the energy transition is large enough. We're all going to have plenty to do. So finding our areas on the field to play in, I think, is critical to our collective success and success for society as a whole. I know all of you are doing really amazing projects and great things already, so you have solved many of these questions of who are the partners to join with and be joined at the hip in the case of Den and Schneider to get some of these things done. But I would be interested to hear, and I think it'd be interesting for the room to hear from the panel and also from you, Mark, where are some of the gaps maybe that you still see where you're looking for a partnership, or what are some of the opportunities that the people in this room might find to partner with you?
I'll tell you, the two big ones for us are the government and the utilities from a data center perspective, because both of them don't, they're accountable ultimately to, in the case of a utility, it's a PUC. In the case of the government, it's, sometimes it's elected officials, but many times it's not. And it's very, very difficult to take complex subjects and try to get them through systems. So I think success stories are going to be ultimately what drive this to where we rely upon a human factor of jealousy, which works really well between governments and utilities at the end of the day.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think you need that partner. It's more about the environment, and you need that partner, whether it's government or utility or your service provider or whomever, to take that leap of faith, to do something that's just outside the box, to do something a little bit differently. And if we have the environment to take that leap of faith, then the collective group can move forward. I think that's where the challenge lies.
In my list of 20 things, I think probably two of the ones we've run into over the past year that have been a little bit mind-numbing is one is sort of antiquated rules, and I was mentioning procurement processes, sort of a lot of these standard processes which worked in the old model don't necessarily work in our new business models. We need to be able to move faster. We need to be able to make decisions faster. And so that's been a challenge, and it's breaking those barriers down. And the other part of it is many of us have been in these, cylinders of excellence. And integrating that is our job, but it is a challenge. And whether it's from a procurement standpoint, I've been used to an ESCO agreement, and that's it. And so now we have to open up the thinking and say, look, we need to figure out ways to combine things like wastewater, bring in these other utility elements that are really critical and important, and be smart about it and be efficient. Because one of the things that we can do, this is our bailiwick, is to be flexible and strategic capital. You have to be able to open up your thinking and say, how do we do this in a way where we can integrate these various different silos of excellence to deliver that? And we all don't have that experience yet fully. So I think that those are the challenges that we faced. mostly.
One other thing that I'd like to add is that we know that there are very local problems in the grid, but we know that there aren't local markets that quantify the benefits of addressing those problems. So being able to address and have markets that are more local and more in tune with the problems at that location and value the resources that are available at that location better, I think that's a big gap in our thinking, because not everywhere the problems are the same and the value changes.
I'll go back even further. We need more engineers. We need electrical engineers that actually go into the electricity business instead of go to work for Google and Facebook and Oracle. So we do. I mean, we need.
We do.
Yeah, we all do, right? We need mechanical engineers that want to be a mechanical engineer, and it's been a long time since we've graduated classes of power engineers. So we have a serious issue in the technology side that we need the folks that are willing to, start at the board and work their way up, or start at the
That's why
computer and
we
work
have
their way
to
up.
fund the undergraduate program.
Yeah, really. And so I always say, please support your local colleges, include them in your projects. My other one is, I always make a plea for this. We need more women-owned businesses in our field. We work with public agencies in the work that we do, with all the work that we do. We always have requirements for small business support. And we have got to encourage more women-owned businesses in our field, not just because it's a good thing to do, but because it's the right thing to do.
Great. Thank you. We are up on time, so Tristan, I will get my answer to you directly at lunch today. I believe we're together. So at first, I would like to thank my panel for joining us here today. These are the people that I look up to in the industry.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.